We're reacting to an epic history video, not just one video, several videos. This is Belisarius, the last Roman, the playlist, 7 videos. I think this is the same channel. No, Hannibal. The Hannibal thing was on History Match. So let's do Belisarius. I'm curious about this guy. I've seen the first part, but my laptop crashed. The one that had the footage. It's also the same laptop that has Claudius and all this other stuff. So I'll watch part 1 again to refresh my memory, and then we'll knock out the other parts. Learn about Belisarius, man. I'll bring Claudius back when I fix my laptop. And yeah, let's learn about Belisarius. This is the epic history, the last Roman. This is the Belisarius playlist. Belisarius, the last Roman playlist.
532 AD. Constantinople, the greatest city in the world, is in flames. But this is no barbarian attack. Citizens of the Eastern Roman Empire are rioting, murdering state officials and setting buildings on fire. Trapped inside his own palace, Emperor Justinian fears his reign is over. He's already given in to the mob's demands and sacked his most hated officials. But now the crowds acclaim a new emperor, Hypatius. It's his wife, Empress Theodora, who'll give him the courage to act.
I love the artwork,
and his most trusted general, Belisarius, to whom he'll turn to crush his enemies and save the regime. After centuries of imperial crisis, Justinian's reign will witness a Roman fightback that few had dreamed possible. Great victories over the barbarians, the reconquest of Rome itself, the reunification of the empire. Belisarius is the commander who will lead this onslaught. He will be remembered as Rome's last great general. AD. It's more than 50 years since the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Rome itself, the eternal city, is now part of an Ostrogothic kingdom of Italy. But though Rome may have fallen, the empire endures. The Eastern Roman Empire remains a force to be reckoned with. An estimated 30 million people live under the rule of the emperor in Constantinople. His authority stretches from the ravaged Balkans to the imperial breadbasket, Egypt, the Arabian desert to the mountains of Armenia. This Christian empire remains unrivaled in administrative sophistication, economic power, and military might. But the new emperor, Justinian, faces formidable challenges. In 527, he succeeds Justin, his uncle and adopted father, becoming the first son to succeed his father as emperor in more than a century. Justinian is from a tough peasant background in Thrace, what's now Serbia. He's highly educated, restless and driven, and sets himself 2 ambitious goals. First, to restore harmony in the Christian Church by ending the schism between Chalcedonian or Orthodox Christians and Miaphysites, who argue over Christ's human and divine nature. Second, to reform and rationalize Roman law, the divinely sanctioned institution that distinguishes the Roman world from the barbarian. The imperial majesty should not only be adorned with arms, but also be armed with laws, so that there may be good government in times both of war and peace, he later declares.
Makes sense.
But as for any Roman emperor, the ultimate test of his legitimacy will come in war. For now, Justinian has good relations with the Vandals in North Africa and the Ostrogoths in Italy. The Balkan frontier requires constant vigilance. The successors to Attila's Hun Empire are never quiet for long. But it's in the east that Justinian faces his most immediate challenge: the Persian Sassanid Empire, a rival superpower of the Middle East. This frontier has been a battleground for centuries and witnessed its share of Roman defeats, including one emperor captured, another killed. For most of the last century, the shared menace of the Huns led to a wary coexistence. But it could not last. In 525, the Christian king of Iberia in the Caucasus appealed to the Romans for aid when the Persian king Kavad tried to impose Zoroastrian rituals on his country. The Romans send military aid, and the conflict escalates, with both sides launching cross-border raids. When the Romans begin building a new fort at Minduos, the Persians attack, rout the Roman troops, and destroy the building works. One of the Roman generals to escape this debacle is Flavius Belisarius. Clearly he is not blamed, because the next year Justinian makes him commander of all Roman troops in the east, though he's barely 30 years old. Belisarius and the emperor are old comrades, and come from the same humble background in Thrace. He had served in Justinian's own regiment when he was still heir to the throne. His wife Antonina is the best friend of Empress Theodora, and like her, from a dubious background in the acting profession. With both Roman and Persian empires mobilizing for war, the next year, 530, will see Belisarius' first major test as a commander. The troops that Belisarius commands are far removed from the famous legions with which Rome conquered its empire centuries ago. Hard lessons learned from fighting Huns and Persians have helped to forge a new Roman army. For centuries, cavalry was the neglected arm of the Roman military, a role usually outsourced to foreign auxiliaries. Now, heavy armoured cavalry known as clibanarii and cataphracti, armed with lance and sword, form the army's elite shock units. Some armoured cavalry, as well as cursores, light cavalry, also carry bows. The Romans, in imitation of the Huns and Persians, are now horse archers themselves. The best units are the bucellarii, the biscuit eaters, named after the army ration. These hand-picked soldiers form a general's personal regiment. Long service, good pay and equipment, plus a personal oath of loyalty make them his most reliable troops. Roman archers are now armed with the more powerful composite reflex bows of the Huns. And while infantry still made up around 2/3 of a Roman army, its role is more defensive, forming a secure base from which the cavalry could launch its attacks. The standard infantry unit is also smaller, called a numerus in Latin, arithmos in Greek, about regimental size, from 1,000 to 1,500 men. They're more mixed, with armoured veterans to form a fulcrum or shield wall, and more missile troops behind them to unleash a barrage of arrows, javelins and darts. Finally, Rome boosts its military strength by recruiting the very barbarians it had once despised, including Huns, Goths and Heruli. Those outside the empire are recruited as mercenaries. Those within serve as foederati, federates, and are usually commanded by their own officers. The military organization of the empire has also been overhauled. Two central field armies stationed on either side of the Bosphorus are commanded by a magister militum presentalis and form a strategic reserve. Field armies based in Thrace, Illyria, Armenia and the East are each commanded by a magister militum and form regional rapid reaction forces. The frontiers are held by the limitani. These are the lowest paid and least well-equipped troops, only expected to hold their fortified outposts until reinforcements arrive. Limitani are organized into local groups, each commanded by a dux, origin of our word, duke. Yet the thought has many times
like
occurred
levies.
to me, how many and how great
They're like levies, yeah?
to the benefit. The thought has many times occurred to me, how many and how great are the benefits which accrue to states through history, which transmits to future generations the memory of those who have gone before, and resists the steady effort of time to bury events in oblivion. The historian Procopius is our key witness for the events of this period. He was born around 500 in the city of Caesarea in Palestine and received a first-class education. In 527, he was appointed assessor or legal advisor to Belisarius. He effectively became the general's secretary and, on occasion, aide-de-camp. Working from notes and writing in Greek, he would publish his great work, History of the Wars, in 551. Procopius's account is highly favorable to Belisarius, but there will be a sting in the tale, a scandalous secret history which will emerge later in the tale. 530 AD. King Kavad sends an army to capture the Roman frontier fortress at Dara. Today, the ruins of Dara lie on the Turkish-Syrian border, their scale hinting at the size of the Roman fortress that once stood here. Belisarius is warned that 40,000 Persian troops are advancing on Dara. He can only assemble 25,000 troops to meet them. For reasons that are unclear, Belisarius decides to make his stand outside the city walls to the south. His men dig ditches to strengthen their position, with both flanks thrown forward. The infantry is placed in the center, with cavalry on both flanks. Two groups of 600 Hun mercenaries are positioned between them in support. At the rear, he places his reserve, his own Bucellari. When the huge Persian army arrives before Dara, Belisarius is ready and waiting. The first day begins with a standoff. The two generals exchange letters. Belisarius urges Firuz to withdraw to allow time for further negotiations. Firuz tells the Roman to prepare his bath. He intends to be in Dara by nightfall. The Persians launch one probing attack against the Roman left wing, perhaps testing their defenses. The Persians are driven off, with 7 killed. When a young Persian warrior rides between the lines and challenges any Roman to face him in single combat, his offer is accepted by Andreas. Andreas has no military training, but he's a wrestling instructor of huge strength. Before the Persian knows what's happening, Andreas has knocked him off his horse with his lance, then dismounts to finish him off, like a sacrificial animal, in the words of Procopius. Andreas later kills a second Persian challenger, to Roman cheers and the dismay of the Persians. The next morning, Firuz receives 10,000 reinforcements, bringing his total strength to 50,000. With odds of 2 to 1 in his favor, he decides to attack. Firuz forms up his army with infantry and foot archers in the center, and his Persian heavy cavalry, the feared Savaran, on both wings. He also divides his army into 2 parts, a front line and a reserve line, so that fresh troops can be rotated into the fighting. He keeps a unit of immortals, the elite Persian heavy cavalry, as his personal reserve. But first, he waits. He knows the Romans usually eat in the morning and are growing hungry, while his own troops are accustomed to eating later in the day. Finally, at noon, he gives the order. The Persian army advances to within bowshot, and both armies unleash a storm of arrows. Persia is famed for the skill of its archers, but today the wind favors the Romans. When When the archers run out of arrows, the Persian cavalry begins its advance. This is the moment Belisarius has prepared for. The Savaran crash into his left wing, driving the Roman horsemen back. But the Persians haven't spotted 300 Heruli horsemen hidden behind a slope on the Roman left, waiting for this moment. They rush out from cover and attack the Persian cavalry from behind. Then 600 Huns fall on their flank. Under this onslaught, the Persian cavalry turns and flees, with heavy losses. Firuz switches to the other flank, attacking with his heavy cavalry, supported by the elite immortals. The Roman cavalry breaks under the pressure, streaming back to the walls of Dara. But Belisarius has seen the threat. He recalls the Huns that are pursuing the Persian right wing and launches both Hun groups, as well as his own Bucellari, against the flank and rear of the Persian attack. It's the decisive moment of the battle. The Persian left wing suddenly finds itself under attack from three sides. Those that can't escape are cut down. Sunikas, one of the Hun captains, kills a Persian standard-bearer, then General Barsham himself, who commands the Persian left wing. With the elite units of the Persian army in flight, the infantry offers little resistance. Most are peasant conscripts, no match for Roman cavalry. Soon the entire Persian army is en route. Belisarius, content with his victory and unwilling to risk any last-minute reverse, halts the pursuit. Procopius tells us 8,000 Persians lay dead on the battlefield, a number that could be accurate. For on that day, the Persians had been defeated in battle by the Romans, a thing which had not happened for a long time. Belisarius has won a brilliant victory for the empire. Later that year, Citas, Magister Militum of Armenia, wins another victory over the Persians at Satala. The war is swinging in Rome's favor. But the following year, encouraged by a Samaritan revolt in Palestine, King Kavad orders a large-scale raid along the Euphrates River. Belisarius assembles an army to meet them. But having ravaged Roman territory, the Persians are content to withdraw with their loot. Belisarius shadows them. His subordinates urge him to destroy the enemy before they escape. So, against his better judgment, he attacks the Persians on Easter Sunday at Callinicum. The battle is a disaster. Rome's Arab allies, the Hassanids, hold the right flank. But Procopius accuses them of fleeing at the first sign of danger. Persian cavalry rolls up the entire Roman line. In desperation, the Roman infantry form a shield wall with their backs to the river. They hold off the enemy cavalry, buying time for the remains of the army to escape across the river. Callinicum is a humiliation for Rome and for Belisarius. His own role in the battle is unclear. According to Procopius, he remained with the infantry, organizing the retreat. Another source claims he was among the first to flee. It had clearly been a serious blunder to give in to pressure from his subordinates to fight an unnecessary battle. Belisarius is removed from command and recalled to Constantinople. Justinian is forced to pay a subsidy and make a compromise peace with Persia. Not with King Kavad, who dies that year, but with his 20-year-old son, Khosrow. Khosrow will prove to be the greatest of all Sasanian kings, hailed as Anushirvan, the immortal soul, and will prove a dangerous rival to the When major rioting breaks out in Constantinople the next year, Belisarius is in the capital, eager to restore his tarnished reputation. The riots have been instigated by the factions of the Hippodrome, the Greens and Blues. These are more than chariot racing fans. The factions run whole areas of the city. At first, they seek only the release of jailed comrades. But then there are calls for a new emperor, Hypatius, nephew of Emperor Anastasius. It's likely that Justinian's rivals in the Senate are now pulling the strings. Justinian hesitates. He wonders if they should flee the capital. Then Theodora speaks up. Life as a fugitive, she declares, would be unendurable. Better the old saying, royal purple makes a noble shroud. In other words, better to go down fighting. The emperor is emboldened by Theodora's words and orders Belisarius and another general, Mundus, to crush the revolt. Belisarius's hardened troops launch a sudden attack on the rioters. There is no mercy. The streets run with blood. The final death toll is estimated at 30,000, a staggering 1 in 20 of the city's population.
Massacre, bro.
The next day, Justinian orders the execution of Hypatius and his brother, probably innocent pawns in somebody else's plot. Their bodies are tossed into the sea. Thanks to Theodora and Belisarius, Justinian's throne is safe, for now. A Roman emperor relied on one quality more than any other from his generals: loyalty. Belisarius has proved his beyond doubt. Now, Justinian needs to shore up support for his regime, assert his legitimacy and God's favour with a military victory. He has his costly peace with the Sassanid Empire, so he will turn west. A war to reclaim Rome's lost provinces from the barbarians will be a service to God and Justinian. Such a mission can be entrusted to only one man: Belisarius. Massive thanks to Legendarian for providing our...
I saw this part, like I said. I saw this. The Dara thing is really impressive. The Damascus thing. That was a blunder, listening to his subordinates, you know. This is obviously someone who's very measured. You can see that in the Battle of Dara. He could have pursued the Persians but chose not to. You know, so him going after the Persians in that Damascus thing. Damascus thing sounds so terrible when I say it like that. Him listening to his subordinates and just doing the reckless thing cost him, but you know, he's kind of like redeemed himself with quelling the revolt in Constantinople in a brutal fashion, though. 30,000 dead. Imagine, man. Imagine 30,000 dying in your city. Of course, it happens to people in wars and stuff. But bro, jeez. Let's jump into the next one, because I've seen this one already. I also love that quote: royal purple makes a noble shroud. You know, let's go. Second video.
533 AD. A major Eastern Roman expeditionary force, 17,000 soldiers, nearly 600 ships, prepares to leave Constantinople. Its objective is the kingdom of the Vandals in North Africa. These were once some of the wealthiest provinces in the Roman Empire, until they were lost to the barbarians, with catastrophic consequences. Now, a century later, the Romans are returning. Emperor Justinian intends to liberate the people of North Africa from barbarian tyranny and the perils of Christian heresy. he entrusts this mission to Flavius Belisarius, the victor of Dara, who's just saved the regime by crushing internal revolt. Now he will lead Eastern Roman forces in the Emperor's campaign to reclaim the West. When the Western Roman Empire was overrun by barbarians in the 5th century, the Vandals emerged as perhaps the most enterprising of Rome's enemies. From Central Europe, they marched, killed and looted their way through Roman territory into Spain, and in 429 crossed into North Africa under the leadership of King Getheric. There he founded a kingdom.
Spain has a very rich history too, man. And North Africa too, I guess. But Spain has been occupied by Romans. I think it's also been occupied by is it the Umayyad Caliphate, a Muslim empire. I think it's been occupied by Goths, probably Vandals too. Spain has seen so much in its history, bro. So much in its history, man. You know? Spain has such a rich history, bro. Iberia, you know?
Zurich. There he founded a kingdom and took up piracy with skill and enthusiasm. In 455, Getheric sacked Rome itself. 75 years later, Eastern Romans and Vandals had learned to tolerate each other. Emperor Justinian's relations with the Vandal king Hilderic were in fact extremely cordial. The two men exchanged gifts, and though Justinian regretted that Hilderic was an Arian heretic, he was pleased that he did at least allow Orthodox Christians in his realm to live in peace. Then, in 530 AD, there was a coup in the kingdom of the Vandals. Gelimer, Hilderic's cousin and heir, seized power and imprisoned the ex-king. Unlike his hapless predecessor, humiliated in war by the Berber tribes, Gelimer was a proven warrior, and cunning to boot. When Justinian scolded Gelimer as a usurper, the new Vandal king warned the emperor to mind his own affairs, then, for good measure, blinded one of Hilderic's nephews. 3 years pass. Justinian makes peace with the Sassanid Empire. The Vandal king warned the Justinian scolded Gelimer as a usurper. The new Vandal king warned the emperor to mind his own affairs, then, for good measure, blinded one of Hilderic's nephews. 3 years pass. Justinian makes peace with the Sassanid Empire and survives the Nika riots. Now he decides it's time to teach Gelimer a lesson. Imperial propaganda and the historian Procopius will later portray Justinian's war on the Vandals as part of a long-held plan to reconquer the Western Empire, for the sake of true belief in God and the liberty of our subjects. Modern historians are more skeptical. Justinian needs a victory to bolster his regime. Gelimer's actions have provided just provocation, and the recovery of North Africa's wealthy estates will bring obvious benefits. Perhaps self-interest, opportunism, and a sense of divine imperial mission all play a part in his decision to go to war. Many try to dissuade the emperor. His senior advisor, John of Cappadocia, warns of the hazards and cost of a long-range, seaborne operation. His generals are haunted by the fate of the last Roman expedition to North Africa, a huge fleet destroyed by Vandal fireships off Cape Bon. Justinian is not deterred. He orders the fleet and army to assemble at Constantinople. Belisarius, restored to the rank of Magister Militum per Orientem, General of the East, is given complete authority over the campaign. His force includes 10,000 infantry under the command of John of Dyrrachium, 5,000 cavalry divided between Federati and regular Roman units, as well as 600 Hun mercenaries, 400 Heruli mercenaries, and Belisarius' own Bucellari, probably around 1,000 men. An old comrade, John of Armenia, will be his second in command. Solomon, a eunuch, his chief staff officer. It is not a large army. An old comrade, John of Armenia, will be his second in command. Solomon, a eunuch, his chief staff officer. It is not a large army, but most are hardened veterans from the wars in the east. Belisarius will also be accompanied by his wife, Antonina, an arrangement that doubtless provokes comments from conservative Romans, but seems to have been generally accepted. She will prove an insightful and effective ally to her husband, as well as a valuable agent to her patron and friend, Empress Theodora. The fleet set sail in June 533. Belisarius believes...
I love the dynamic between Justinian, Theodora, Belisarius, and is it Antonina, his wife? I love that they're like family friends. You know, I like that dynamic. They seem really close. You know, not just Justinian and Belisarius, but their wives too. Of course, anything could happen. Belisarius and Antonina could decide, yo man, how we should be emperor and empress. Let's do something. They could easily do that, you know. Not easily, but they could betray them or, you know, try something like that. But I love that they're friends. I love that shit, man. You know, if it doesn't go wrong. If no one betrays anyone, it's really nice to have that, you know. Not just loyalty, but, you know, I like that they're friends like that, especially the wives. You know, I love that, dude.
Set sail Theodora. The fleet set sail in June 533. Belisarius believes that much will depend on the discipline of his men. But before they've even cleared the Hellespont, 2 Hun mercenaries drunkenly murder a comrade.
What?
Belisarius has them hanged in full view of the fleet. Drunkenly murder a comrade. Cleared the Hellespont. 2 Hun mercenaries drunkenly murder a comrade. Belisarius has them hanged in full view of the fleet. Then he addresses the army. If I were speaking to men going to war for the first time, I might struggle to persuade you that justice can be our greatest ally in obtaining victory. For those who don't understand the fortunes of war, think the outcome depends on strength alone. But you, I think, know that although it's men who do the fighting, it is God who judges the contest. This is why, Belisarius warns them, he will never turn a blind eye to their crimes. He concludes, I shall not consider any one of you my comrade, no matter how fearsome he is to the enemy, unless his hands are clean. The fleet continues its voyage, making stops to pick up supplies and additional troops. Along the way, 500 men die from eating moldy bread, which Procopius blames on cost-cutting measures by the stingy John of Cappadocia. In Sicily, Belisarius receives fresh supplies from the Goths. There, as he ponders his next move, he receives stunning news. Not only are the Vandals completely unaware of his expedition, but Gelimer has sent his brother Zazo with most of the Vandal fleet and 5,000 troops to quell a revolt in Sardinia. Belisarius might have been tempted to land in Tripolitania, where Romanized locals are already in revolt against the Vandals. But reassured by the absence of the Vandal fleet, he decides to land in the Vandal heartland, within striking distance of their capital, Carthage. The landing is unopposed, but Belisarius is furious when some of his men steal from the locals. He has them punished, then speaks once more to the troops. The Libyans, being Romans from of old, are unfaithful and hostile to the Vandals. Now your lack of self-control has made the opposite true. He warns them that lawlessness will lose them the support of the people and lead only to defeat and death. But with good behavior, you will have God on your side. The Libyan people will support you, and the Vandals will be at your mercy. Belisarius orders some of his most trusted men to infiltrate a nearby town, Selectum, to see if the people will come over to the Roman side. The soldiers enter discreetly at dawn. They inform local elders that Belisarius has come to overthrow Gelimer the usurper and restore their freedom. The townsmen agree to let the army into the city and open the market to them. Belisarius is gracious and generous to the Libyans. Crucially, his men behave well. They pay for supplies and win the trust of the locals. Procopius, an eyewitness, records that...
This is genius by Belisarius, man. This is already, I'm seeing his strictness. Of course, he just massacred an entire revolt, 30,000 people. So he's capable of brutality too, but he's very... I like this about him, you know. You don't need more problems than you have, dude. You're already in hostile territory. You know, it's like when an army is invading a territory or a kingdom, it's like the locals could be on your side or they could really be against you. And if they're on your side, things will be super easy. You'll get info, you'll get supplies, you'll get backup, you know. But if you're invading and the locals are pissed off at you, it's even harder. You have to resort to brutal methods against the fucking citizens themselves. It's like, I like this about him. It's it's like we don't need more problems than we have, bro. You know, he's very measured when the situation needs a measured approach. You know, this is very unique. The optics, man. Like, we're going there as liberators. Don't go there looting and fucking just, you know, doing atrocities to the fucking locals, man. I like this. This is one, so far, this is his standout quality. Of course, he's a great commander on the field. Dara, case in point. Capable of brutality. Constantinople. Zika riots, Nika riots. And now here is like, even the way he hung those drunken mercenaries that killed our comrade. It's like, he's using the God excuse. Like, if we do the right thing and don't commit atrocities needlessly, it's like we'll have good karma type thing. You know, we need the good karma. But, religion is strong, you know, people pay attention to this stuff, you know, God this, God that. So these people will listen. It's like, you know, it's like, stop embarrassing yourself in front of God and ruining our good karma. Or he wants them to feel like they have justice and God on their side. If you're raping, looting, stealing, and all this shit, man, why would God help you? He's using that, but in reality, what he's doing, he's using that message and, you know, religion and that whole message to keep them in line. You know, it really works if you're going into hostile territory. If you're going to another kingdom, you know, you're not in your kingdom, you're in another kingdom. So, behave well. We need the locals to be on our side. I love this, man. I love this, man.
The trust of the locals. Procopius, an eyewitness, records that from henceforth, the campaign is like moving through their own country. Belisarius begins his advance along the coastal road to Carthage. He knows Gelimer is somewhere inland and could strike from almost any direction. So he orders John of Armenia, his second in command, to take 300 Bucellari and scout 2 miles ahead of the main army. Belisarius himself commands a strong rear guard. The Huns are posted as a flank guard, 2 miles inland. Their sea flank is protected by the fleet, keeping pace with the army's advance. The army marches about 10 miles each day, then fortifies a camp at night. When Gelimer receives news of the Roman landing, he sends a message to his brother Amatus in Carthage. First, he is to execute Hilderic and the other prisoners. Then he is to gather all his men and join Gelimer at Addecimum, where they...
Wow. Execute Hilderic and all of his men, because Hilderic got usurped. He might side with the Romans if they promise to install him back on the throne. That's a problem he needs to get rid of. You don't need someone they can rally to, you know. If they free his cousin, Hilderic, he might rally forces to help the Romans.
First, he is to execute Hilderic and the other prisoners. Then he is to gather all his men and join Gelimer at Addecimum, where they will ambush and destroy Belisarius' army. Addecimum, 10 miles south of Carthage. Here, the coastal road passes through a narrow gap between a salt marsh and the sea. Gelimer knows Belisarius will have to pass this way, and that the headland of Cape Bon will separate him from his fleet. Amatus is to hold the road to Carthage, and when the Romans are fully engaged, Gelimer and his nephew Gibamund will fall on their flank and rear. Belisarius and his army approach. Roman patrols report skirmishes with the Vandals. Gelimer is close. A few miles short of Addecimum, Belisarius gives the order to make camp and sends John's vanguard ahead to scout the road. At Addecimum, they find Amatus with just a handful of troops. He has arrived too early. The rest of his men are still strung out on the road to Carthage. John and the Bucellari charge. Amatus fights bravely, killing 12 men before he is cut down. The Vandals' survivors flee back towards Carthage, with John and his men in pursuit. Groups of Vandals coming up the road see the fleeing horsemen. They think the whole Roman army must be headed their way. They panic and join the rout. John and his men slay all the Vandals they can catch. Meanwhile, on the edge of the Salt Lake, the Huns have encountered Gibamund's column. According to a Hun custom, a single warrior rides forward to meet the enemy. This is the first time Gibamund and his men have faced Huns, but they know their fearsome reputation. They are unnerved by the lone horseman and suspect a trap. When the Huns charge, the Vandals quickly turn and flee. Gibamund is one of those killed in the rout. Gelimer is advancing between low hills that block his view of both.
The Huns, man. What a reputation, bro. So this whole this is a Han tradition, yeah. One rider, kind of like riding ahead to go. Maybe it's a champion looking to challenge their champion. Maybe that's how they do their battles, or that's how they start, maybe. Or maybe that's how they determine battles, because sometimes they'll do the champion thing and decide everything that way, instead of losing men. I need to dive deeper on the Huns, understand them better. Because I know Attila the Hun, I did a reaction to Attila the Hun. It's fucking trapped on my laptop that crashed. But It wasn't that in-depth anyway. I didn't like the video that much. I think I'll do a better one. I need to understand not just Attila, but the Huns in general. Because they're pretty formidable, man. You know, they were a nuisance for the Persians, a nuisance for the Romans, to the Celts, I think. Attila and all that. Yeah, man, I want to do something on that. This is so...
They are East Huns, as Bumann's column. According to a Hun custom, a single warrior rides forward to meet the enemy. This is the first time Gibbermund and his men have faced Huns, but they know their fearsome reputation. They are unnerved by the lone horseman and suspect a trap. When the Huns charge, the Vandals quickly turn and flee. Gibbermund is one of those killed in the rout. Gelimer is advancing between low hills that block his view of both Belisarius' camp and the fate of Gibbermund. Belisarius is also unaware that battle has been joined, but sends his Federati cavalry forward, expecting some skirmishing with the Vandals. When his cavalry reach Ad Decimum, they see signs of fighting and bodies. Then, several thousand Vandal horsemen appear behind them. The Federati commanders have no idea whether to advance or retreat. After a brief clash, the entire force retreats back towards the Roman camp. Gelimer is now in position to deal Belisarius a serious blow. If he heads north, he can trap and destroy John's isolated vanguard. If he moves south, he can hit the Roman cavalry while it's still confused and disordered. Instead, Gelimer discovers the body of his brother, Amatus, and is overcome with grief. As their king oversees his brother's burial, his perplexed troops look on and do nothing. Belisarius is given a crucial breathing space. He rallies his cavalry, reorganizes them, and leads them forward. The Roman cavalry fall on the Vandals with devastating force. The enemy are scattered. Gelimer and the survivors fly west. The road to Carthage is open. And it fell to Belisarius that day to win more fame than any other man of his time, or indeed any of the men of olden times. Belisarius, wary of ambush, waits till dawn the next day before making his triumphal entry into Carthage. Once more, his troops behave well. The citizens of Carthage are respected. This peaceful occupation of such a wealthy city in such times is remarkable. Belisarius sits on Gelimer's throne and eats the lunch that had been prepared for him. He attends to the requests and pleas of local citizens. But the Vandals aren't beaten yet. Belisarius receives news, intended for Gelimer, that Zazo has put down the Sardinian revolt and is returning with 5,000 men. Reinforced, Gelimer advances on Carthage. Belisarius leads out his army to face him at Tricomarum. The Roman cavalry camps near a small brook, where the Vandals catch them off guard, deploying for battle while the Romans are still making lunch. But again, Gelimer fails to exploit an advantage. He does nothing as the Romans deploy, and their infantry, which had fallen behind on the...
Yeah, plus now the Romans have Carthage, bro. They just occupied Carthage in a very peaceful manner. Now the Carthaginians are probably supplying them. They have Carthage, bro. They have a supply base, man, because of their approach. This is genius by Belisarius, man. It's very important to win over the locals. You know? Carthage is his right now. They have supplies. They have, they can fall back into Carthage. And because they've been respectful, They don't have to worry about a fucking uprising or anything. People don't like Gelimer. Man, genius. Him sitting there and address and, you know, like attending to court, eating Gelimer's lunch and stuff. That is so boss, man. What a boss, man. What a gangster. I'm fucking loving this dude. I love Hannibal. I'm collecting, like, I have a collection of characters that I love from ancient times now, from watching videos and stuff. Fucking love Hannibal. Fucking love Arminius with the Teutoburg attack. I love that dude. And I'm loving this guy too. I'm sure the list will continue growing, you know. Like, I love these guys more than Caesar and these other guys. You know. Hannibal, Belisarius, so far so good. I'm loving this dude. Maybe we'll see how it goes. And Arminius, man. I love those three for some reason, bro. Not for some reason, I'm sure you'll get it.
Of local citizens. But the Vandals aren't beaten yet. Belisarius receives news, intended for Gelimer, that Zazo has put down the Sardinian revolt and is returning with 5,000 men. Reinforced, Gelimer advances on Carthage. Belisarius leads out his army to face him at Tricomarum. The Roman cavalry camps near a small brook, where the Vandals catch them off guard, deploying for battle while the Romans are still making lunch. But again, Gelimer fails to exploit an advantage. He does nothing as the Romans deploy, and their infantry, which had fallen behind on the march from Carthage, gets into position.
Pitched battle
it's
against
the Romans
Rome.
who attack first, when John of Armenia leads the Bucellari forward against the Vandal centre. Twice he is repulsed, but the third attack is made with greater force. Zazo himself is killed within sight of Gelimer. Belisarius orders the rest of his army forward. The Vandals flee, leaving behind 800 dead. The Romans have lost just 50 men. The Vandals take refuge in their camp, which contains all their baggage and their families. But when Belisarius brings up his infantry to begin the assault, King Gelimer flees. The fight is entirely one-sided. Panic soon engulfs the Vandal camp as everyone tries to escape. The Romans kill the men, enslave the women and children, and plunder all they can find. Belisarius cannot restore discipline until the morning. Gelimer flees towards the mountains.
Like in the heat of the moment, it's hard to control the troops. I feel like, you know, when people are in the thick of it fighting and they've won, people will do fucking bad things, bro. You know, people will do bad things. It's like Henry V invading France, because he considered himself, he was basically calling out the king of France, you know, saying, yeah, I'm walking around in your territory doing whatever the fuck I want. But realistically, he wanted his soldiers to behave well, because he was trying to act like he was the king of the French. He didn't want to hurt the French citizens and stuff. His beef was only with the king and the army and stuff. So he didn't really want to, like, to loot and burn farms and rape and pillage the locals, but he couldn't stop it. You know, in the heat of the moment, when the troops are fighting and they are riled up like that, bro, shit just happens, and you just let it play out. Punish whoever you can punish afterwards and try to correct them. But in this moment, in the heat of the moment, it's almost impossible to stop your soldiers, even in the militaries today, bro. You know, you hear about uh, raping and killing of women and children. You know, it's like world leaders will come will come out and deny that this shit is happening on their watch, but it's happening even if they don't want it to happen. It just happens. It's just part of war, bro. It's just part of it. It just sucks.
The morning. Gelimer flees towards the mountains. Belisarius sends John in pursuit with 200 horsemen, but 5 days later, John is accidentally killed by one of his own men. Belisarius grieves at the death of his old comrade. He sends Pharas and his Heruli to take over the pursuit of Gelimer. The Vandal king takes refuge with the Berber tribes. 3 months later, hunger and the promise of comfort and clemency persuades him to surrender. Meanwhile, Belisarius sends one of his officers to Sardinia with the head of the king's brother Zazo. The island quickly submits to Roman rule, as too does Corsica. From Carthage, detachments and emissaries travel east.
That's crazy, man. He's sending them the head of the guy that just quelled a rebellion right there. Like the guy that was sent by Gelimer, Zazo, to go deal with the revolt in Sardinia and did it successfully. They see his head being brought to them and they're like, holy fuck, man. We couldn't fucking handle this guy and they're bringing us his head. You know? It's scary. It's a show of power. Like, this guy that you guys couldn't handle, the Romans have handled. Plus, if you guys were revolting against these guys, you clearly don't like them. This guy was fucking with you. He probably killed a lot of you guys quelling the rebellion. We've handled him for you. It cuts both ways. It's a show of friendship. Like, we fucked this guy up that was fucking with you guys. It's also, it can also be looked at as this guy that fucking destroyed you guys. We fucking destroyed him. Here's his head. Ah, man. Just the message alone gets them Corsica and Sardinia. They don't even have to fight them.
The island quickly submits to Roman rule, as too does Corsica. From Carthage, detachments and emissaries travel east and west as North Africa rejoins the Roman Empire. Settlements and outrage, detachments and as too does Corsica. From Carthage, detachments and emissaries travel east and west as North Africa rejoins the Roman Empire. Settlements and outposts still suffer Berber raids, but Belisarius delegates this war to his able staff officer Solomon. He sails for Constantinople with his prisoners and a vast quantity of loot. He has learned that a small group of officers, motivated by envy and ambition, have told the emperor that Belisarius plans to found his own kingdom in North Africa. Belisarius soon persuades Justinian in person that this is all lies and his loyalty is absolute. The emperor rewards him with a triumph, the victory parade with which for 1,000 years the Romans had celebrated their greatest conquests. It's the first triumph to be awarded to anyone but an emperor in 500 years. He is also awarded the title of consul, once the senior political office in the Roman Republic, long since reduced to an honorary title. Belisarius's loot, including much of what the Vandals had plundered from Rome, is paraded in front of the citizens of Constantinople and the emperor, along with his prisoners, including King Gelimer himself, who is heard to mutter words from the Old Testament. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. Whether such events as these...
Are the Vandals, are they Christian? Because the previous king, Hederic, they considered him a heretic. They mentioned something about heresy earlier. You know, maybe he was, then maybe they are not Christian, but the previous king allowed Christians to live normally in Carthage and stuff, you know, in North Africa. So maybe this guy is quoting the Bible here. Maybe he's Christian, you know. Maybe it's another form of Christian. Maybe it's like Protestant or something, you know. They consider it heresy, but I don't know. What religion were the Vandals?
All is vanity. Whether such events as these ever took place before, I am not able to say. The Vandal kingdom at the height of its wealth and military strength completely undone in so short a time by 5,000 men. For such was the number of horsemen who followed Belisarius and carried through the whole war against the Vandals. For whether this happened by chance or valour, one would justly marvel at it. Known to history as the Vandalic War, Belisarius's campaign has reclaimed one of the Roman Empire's wealthiest provinces in just 6 months with minimal losses. The Battle of Dara had proven his skill as a tactical commander. In North Africa, his victory comes through discipline and diplomacy, and a brilliantly successful Hearts and Minds campaign.
Yeah.
But already it's clear there are those within the Empire who resent such success and seek his downfall. Belisarius will not have long to rest on his laurels. A murder in far-off Tuscany is about to lead to his most formidable challenge yet. The victim is Amalasuntha, daughter of Theodoric the Great. Her death means war between the Eastern Empire and the Goths. A war that will lead Belisarius to the gates of Rome itself. Big thanks to the daughter of Theodoric. The victim is Amalasuntha, daughter of Theodoric the Great. Her death means war between the Eastern Empire and the Goths. A war...
Wow, who killed her? Cause Rome right now is under the Ostrogoths, yeah? So if this is, maybe they think she was murdered by Romans. Yeah? Who's she again?
Rest on his laurels.
I don't know that her dad, maybe famous Ostrogoth. Not famous, but you know.
A murder.
Of course famous, but a great...
Murder in far-off Tuscany is about to lead to his most formidable challenge yet. The victim is Amalasuntha, daughter of Theodoric the Great.
Theodoric the Great, was he Theodoric the Great, was he a king or just a great general? Probably. So now she was the queen of the Ostrogoths, yeah?
Her death means war between the Eastern Empire and the Goths. A war that will lead Belisarius to the gates of Rome itself. Big thanks to Legendarian for providing our Total War artillery.
Okay. Theodoric the Great, I don't know who that is. Let me just write that down. Theodoric the Great. Amalasuntha, queen of the Ostrogoths. When they say queen of the Ostrogoths, is she like the main monarch? Is it like Queen Elizabeth, where she's the one ruling, not her husband, you know, like Queen like Queen Elizabeth, where she's the one ruling, not her husband. Is it that type of dynamic? Or is this just, you know, she's the daughter of Theodoric the Great. Maybe she's married to someone who's the king of the Ostrogoths. She's just the queen, the wife of the guy, like a first lady type. Or maybe she's the one, maybe she's the president, not the first lady type thing, you know. Queen Elizabeth was the president, not the first lady. You know, people like Anne Boleyn and these people, those who are first ladies, you could say, they were married to the king. They were queens, but because they are married to the king, they're not the ones ruling. Whereas in Queen Elizabeth, she's the one ruling. Her husband is, he might have the title king, but he's not the one ruling, you know, because of the lineage and succession, you know. So curious to see, curious to learn more about this Theodoric character, and to see just how much power Malasunta had, because if she's the one ruling and she's dead now, she's been murdered, maybe they suspect, or maybe they know, if her death means war between the Ostrogoths and the Eastern Roman Empire. Why? Did they kill her? Did the Romans kill her? Maybe that's the reason they want to go to war with them. Maybe they suspect the Romans killed her, or maybe the Romans wanted to play out like that. Maybe they probably did. Maybe they want to trigger the conflict that way. Maybe they're claiming responsibility because they want a reason for the war. So they might act like they're the ones who killed her. You know, it might not be them, but they might be like, you know, that works. It's a reason to go to war, so fuck it. Let's claim it, you know. Next, episode 3, man.
534 AD. Flavius Belisarius, Eastern Roman general, has waged one of the most successful campaigns in the empire's history. The complete reconquest of North Africa in just 6 months, almost without loss. He is well rewarded by Emperor Justinian. He celebrates his victory with a triumph in Constantinople and receives the title of consul. Belisarius has helped Justinian's regime survive political crisis. Now his victory offers irrefutable proof of God's divine sanction. Emboldened,
I love Byzantine fashion, bro. Like the stuff they wore. The stuff looks so good. Their crowns look amazing. Their cloaks look amazing. Like the decorative aspect of it, you know. A lot of gold, it looks like, a lot of pearls. I love the aesthetic of the Byzantine Empire. Their stuff so cool, man.
Survive political crisis. Now his victory offers irrefutable proof of God's divine sanction. Emboldened, Justinian will pursue a new strategic vision, the reconquest of the Western Roman Empire and its reunification. Belisarius's next mission will be to Italy, where he will fight a desperate struggle for the eternal city, Rome itself. 60 years have passed since the Western Roman Empire fell to barbarians. Many kings emerged to rule over its shattered remains. Above them all towered Theodoric the Great. With Eastern Roman approval, he'd led his Ostrogoth warbands from the Balkans into Italy. He overthrew and killed Odoacer, the man who'd deposed the last Western emperor, and forged his own Goth superstate. Theodoric, an Arian Christian, worked with the Senate in Rome and sought close relations with the Eastern Roman Empire. To Emperor Anastasius he wrote, "Our royalty is an imitation of yours, modelled on your good purpose, a copy of the only empire." Procopius, the 6th century historian and aide to Belisarius, would himself praise Theodoric as, in name a tyrant, but in fact an emperor, no less than any who've ever distinguished themselves in that office. In the eyes of his supporters, Theodoric had revived the Western Roman Empire, in all but name. But the succession would unravel his great achievement. Theodoric had 3 daughters, so his heir was to have been his son-in-law, Eutharic. but he died so his heir was. Theodoric had 3 daughters, so his heir.
Okay, Theodoric Ostrogoth. I love these names, man.
Achievement. Theodoric had 3 daughters, so his heir was to have been his son-in-law, Eutharic, but he died 4 years before the king in 522. The succession passed to Theodoric's 10-year-old grandson, Athalaric. His mother, the highly educated and formidable Amalasuntha, ruled as regent.
Okay.
In defending her position, Amalasuntha made powerful enemies among the Goths, and when her son died aged just 18, one of those enemies, her cousin Theodahad, became king. In 535, he has Amalasuntha imprisoned on an island in the middle of Lake Borsina. Weeks later, assassins arrive. They're rumored to be vengeful relatives of men Amalasuntha had killed during her regency. The daughter of Theodoric the Great is strangled in her bath. Theodahad thinks he can quietly eliminate his rival without repercussions. But Amalasuntha had been a trusted ally of the Emperor Justinian, and he is looking for an excuse for war. And the Emperor, upon learning what had befallen Amalasuntha, immediately entered upon the war, being in the 9th year of his reign. For Justinian, chaos at the Ostrogoth court presents an opportunity. After success in North Africa, he wants Italy for the empire. The strategic and symbolic gains will be immense. Before her death, Amalasuntha had offered him the kingdom in exchange for political asylum. Now Justinian pressures Theodahad, a notoriously corrupt and greedy man, to accept the same deal or face war. Justinian's tough diplomacy is backed up by military deployments. Mundus, commanding the army in Illyria, advances into Goth-controlled Dalmatia and takes Salona, the modern city of Split. Belisarius, meanwhile, is ordered to sail with 9,000 men to Sicily to see if the Goths there will put up a fight. Only the garrison of Palermo offers resistance, which is soon overcome. The rest of Sicily submits to the Romans without a fight. On the last day of 535, Belisarius marks the end of his consulship, scattering coins to the crowds in Syracuse as his troops march triumphantly through the city. As negotiations continue in the Goth capital Ravenna between Theodahad and Justinian's envoy, Solomon, Praetorian prefect of North Africa, arrives in Sicily with alarming news from Carthage. The army, angered by late pay and religious discrimination, has murdered its officers and mutinied. Belisarius immediately sails for Carthage with just 100 picked men. His own formidable reputation, plus generous handouts of cash, quickly secures the loyalty of 2,000 troops, whom he leads out to face the 9,000 mutineers. The mutineer army is a motley crew of Romans, mercenaries, renegade Vandals, and escaped slaves, commanded by Stotzas, a former Belisarius. They have no generals and little discipline. When Stotzas tries to maneuver his army into a better position, it becomes badly disordered. Belisarius immediately launches an all-out attack. Stotzas and his army turn and run.
Wow.
Belisarius has saved Carthage, but the war in North Africa against Berbers and rebels will drag on for 15 more years. This task falls to Solomon, as Belisarius must race back to Sicily to quash another mutiny among his own troops. In the Balkans, meanwhile, a Goth counterattack results in the death of General Mundus, and the Romans make a tactical withdrawal. When news of this minor triumph reaches King Theodahad, he feels suddenly emboldened and rejects all Justinian's demands. Belisarius receives new orders. He is to cross the Strait of Messina and reconquer Italy from the Ostrogoths. Belisarius lands in Italy with barely 8,000 men. The bulk of his troops are infantry, including 3,000 Isaurians, fierce warriors from the Taurus mountains of Anatolia. His cavalry includes Hun and Berber mercenaries, as well as the elite Bucellari, the picked troops maintained by Belisarius, and other senior commanders. As in North Africa, he is accompanied on campaign by his wife Antonina, a capable and trusted ally of Empress Theodora. That the Emperor entrusts the campaign to such a small force, when the Goths can field an army 4 times its size, indicates Justinian's supreme confidence in Belisarius. But it is also a sign that he has badly underestimated the Goths and their will to fight. Belisarius's army is welcomed by southern Italians and meets no opposition as far as Naples. This city has strong walls and a garrison of 800 Goths. Belisarius appeals directly to its citizens, urging them to throw open the gates and warning of the dire consequences of an assault. I pray that an ancient city which has long been inhabited by Christians and Romans may not meet with such a fortune, especially at my hands as a commander of Roman troops. The citizens of Naples are divided, but ultimately their leaders reject the demand to hand over the city. When Belisarius's troops sneak into the city using an old aqueduct,
This is so... The civilians here are so screwed, man. As is always the case in these situations, man. Because they don't get to this. They could, start a revolt and open the gates, but if they do that, they'll probably be killed by the Goths. There are by the Gothic garrison that's in the city. So it's not up to them. They might want to open the gates, but it's not even their decision, But when the Romans come in, they'll pay the price. It's so unfair for them. It's like you're appealing to us to open the gates. If we do that, these guys will probably kill us. And if we don't do it, you guys will storm the city, and if you win and sack the city, we are fucked anyway.
their leaders reject the demand to hand over the city. When Belisarius's troops sneak into the city using an old aqueduct, there is a savage slaughter of Goths and Italian citizens alike, until the general can restore order. The main Ostrogoth army has been standing idle 60 miles to the north. Theodahad, never suited to military command, and now unsettled by omens, does nothing to save Naples. It's his own death sentence. He is deposed and killed. Witigis becomes the new king of the Ostrogoths. He is in his 60s, but he's an experienced soldier who fought alongside Theodoric the Great. He assumes that Belisarius must be leading a large army up from the south, and wants more time to gather his forces. He also plans to negotiate a truce with the Franks, which will free up more troops for the war against the Romans. So, leaving 4,000 men to hold Rome, Witigis withdraws to Ravenna. Belisarius garrisons Naples and advances up the old Roman road, the Via Latina, to Rome. But as he nears the great city, the Goths simply abandon it. They march out through the Porta Flaminia, as Belisarius and his army march in through the Porta Asinaria, a gate which, though much restored, survives to this day. 60 years after the fall of the Western Empire, Rome once more belongs to the Romans. Belisarius duly dispatches the keys to the city to Emperor Justinian. Rome in the 6th century is still a great city, but a shadow of its former glory. In its imperial heyday, Rome's population had been around 500,000. Now it's just a fifth of that. But it remains the seat of the Roman Senate and the Pope, and a city of intense emotional and cultural significance to all Romans. The city is also notoriously difficult to defend, which is why the Goths have abandoned it. The famous Aurelian walls are crumbling, and at 12 miles in length are too long for a small army to easily hold. The Goths had also worried that Rome's large population might turn against them. Belisarius is down to 7,000 men, not enough to face the Goths in open battle. So he sends detachments to garrison key strongholds along the Via Flaminia, the road to Ravenna, which he hopes will delay the inevitable Goth advance. While in Rome, he and his men begin hurried preparations for a siege. The walls are repaired, and merlons are added. A deep moat is dug around the city. The granaries are filled with grain. All Rome's adult male citizens are conscripted into the city guard. Witigis, meanwhile, has been told how small Belisarius' army is. Embarrassed by his earlier caution, he gives the order for his reinforced army to march on Rome. His chief concern is to get there before Belisarius can escape, but Belisarius has no plans to flee. And whoever of you has hopes of setting foot in Rome without a fight is mistaken in his judgment. For as long as Belisarius lives, it is impossible for him to relinquish this city. Such were the words of Belisarius. 537 AD. In early spring, Witigis leads a huge Goth army, probably more than 30,000 men, down the Via Flaminia, sweeping past the small Roman outposts. Belisarius plans to fight a delaying action a mile and a half north of the city, at the Milvian Bridge. But his infantry, terrified by the size of the Goth army, abandon the bridge without a fight. Belisarius is left facing the Goth army with just 1,000 horsemen. He orders his men to charge. Belisarius himself fights in the front rank. Scores of men fall around him. Goth spears finally drive Belisarius and his men back towards the Porta Salaria. At first, its defenders don't recognize Belisarius, covered in dust and gore, and won't let him in. He's forced to launch another desperate charge to drive the Goths back from the walls. Finally, the gate is opened, and he and his men get back into the city. The siege of Rome begins. The city is too large for Witigis to completely surround. He builds 7 fortified camps north of the city and cuts the aqueducts that have supplied Rome with water for 800 years. There will be no baths for the Romans, but the city's wells will still supply drinking water. When Belisarius rejects calls to surrender, the Goths begin building rams, ladders and siege towers for a major assault. 18 days later, they attack. But their inexperience in siege warfare is soon evident. Their towers are pulled by oxen. The Romans shoot all the animals, and the towers are left stranded. The Goths assault the city from multiple directions. The mausoleum of Hadrian, converted into a fortress, comes under heavy pressure. But eventually, the Goths are thrown back on all fronts. That night, the Goths assault the city from multiple directions. The mausoleum of Hadrian, converted into a fortress, comes under heavy pressure. But eventually, the Goths are thrown back on all fronts. That night, the Romans celebrate a great victory, lighting fires and singing from the battlements. Both sides prepare for a long siege. Belisarius is an inspiring presence in the city, active, calm and confident, even when others begin to despair. He has written to Justinian urgently requesting reinforcements. Now he oversees every aspect of the city's defense and supply. He orders all non-combatants to travel south to Naples, so there are fewer mouths to feed. He has the keys to the gates changed regularly to reduce the risk from treachery, while his Berber mercenaries patrol at night with dogs to detect any surprise attack. His wife, Antonina, also takes an active role. When the Pope is suspected of conducting secret talks with the Goths, she demands, "Tell us, Lord Pope Silverius, what have we done to you and the Romans to make you want to betray us to the Goths?" The Pope is arrested and sent out of the city. A month into the siege, Belisarius receives much-needed reinforcements. 1,600 cavalry, mostly Huns and Slavs, led by Martinus and Valerian. Belisarius has seen that the Goths have no mounted archers. Now he can use his own to make hit-and-run attacks against the enemy. A few hundred horsemen will ride within range of the Goths, shower them with arrows, then fall back under covering fire from the city walls. Procopius counts 67 actions of this type, both large and small. Almost all are won by the Romans because of their superior cavalry. The victories raise morale and frustrate the enemy, but they will not break the siege. The situation deteriorates dramatically when the Goths take Portus, Rome's port at the mouth of the river Tiber, making it much more difficult to get supplies into the city. By September, 6 months into the siege, hunger and sickness begin to take hold. Even the army's mules are killed to make sausages. The citizens of Rome beg Belisarius to stake everything on one decisive battle for the city. But he refuses, telling them, "You act as though you were playing dice and want to risk everything on a single roll, but it is not my custom to choose the short course over the best course."
He learned from Damascus, bro.
Instead, Belisarius sends Antonina and Procopius to Naples, with instructions to use his authority to requisition all grain and every soldier who can be spared, and send both to Rome. 500 men and a convoy of supplies are soon rolling up the Via Appia. They're followed by 1,800 cavalry reinforcements, who land at Dryas, modern Otranto. Then 3,000 Isaurians arrive at Naples aboard grain ships and travel on to Ostia by sea. After months of delay, the vast resources of the Eastern Roman Empire are finally coming to Belisarius's aid. The garrison of Rome launch a series of diversionary attacks on the Goths. These allow the supplies, under Antonina's direction, to slip into the city. The threat of starvation is ended. It's the last straw for Witigis. His own men have been camped outside Rome for almost a year, harassed by the enemy, themselves decimated by disease and hunger. The Ostrogoth king asks for a truce, to open negotiations with the emperor. He offers Justinian all of southern Italy, but it is not enough. the initiative has swung to Belisarius. Belisarius has sent an elite force of 2,000 cavalry, commanded by John, north into Picenum, behind enemy lines. When the Goths break the terms of the truce, Belisarius orders John to unleash hell. Almost all the Goth warriors are away on military service. Their farms and settlements are completely exposed. John sacks, burns and plunders at will, enslaving hundreds of Goth women and children. Romans are not harmed. Witigis' uncle gathers a small force to challenge John. They're no match for his Bucellari. John ignores the Goth strongholds at Urbino and Auximum, but at the invitation of its citizens occupies the walled city of Ariminum, just 30 miles south of the Ostrogoth capital at Ravenna. Witigis has no choice but to abandon the siege and march north to defend the Goth heartland. Against the odds, under-resourced and outnumbered, Belisarius has triumphed in one of history's most epic sieges. A siege that has lasted 1 year and 9 days. Because of him, the city of Romulus and the Caesars once more belongs to the Roman Empire. The war against the Goths in Italy seems to be entering its final phase. Belisarius' position appears unassailable. But, as every emperor knows, the history of the empire has been blighted time and again by the treachery of overmighty generals. Belisarius' victories are as glorious as any in Rome's history. How can Justinian not regard him with suspicion? Soon Belisarius will find himself facing new rivals from within the empire, just as an old enemy re-emerges in the east.
Khosrow.
Big thanks.
Damn. This always happens, bro. Hannibal faced the same thing. He's killing it out in the field on campaign, covering himself with glory. And then idiots, jealous idiots, just start undermining him, because of jealousy, paranoia, This always happens, bro, to generals, great generals, bro. Because there's nothing more impressive and glorious than doing what Belisarius is doing right now. Like, if you wanted to, the troops decide who gets to be king or emperor. It's usually the troops. The guy that has the most backing with the troops tends to prevail in such matters. Caesar was the same. He had the troops and the people. Belisarius has the troops, all this glory, all these wins, achievements that he's achieving out there on campaign. This is a big deal. Taking Rome for the empire, Carthage, Dara, like he's developing a resume that is so it's such a strong resume that if he's not loyal, the resume alone is enough for people to be like, fuck Justinian, this is our guy. The same with Hannibal, bro. I think people are starting to whisper in Carthage that this guy wants to make himself king, bro. I mean, Jesus Christ, look what he's doing out there, man. Look at all these wins. This guy could make himself king if he wanted. He has the resume. He has the wins. Like, you become a very scary person to a lot of people. Not just the emperor himself, other politicians and other ambitious people in Rome. Like Caesar, man. The Senate was growing wary of him. Other politicians in Rome were growing wary of him because it's like, this guy with what he's doing out there, this guy could just easily make himself king. And I was worried that this was coming. Let's see how Justinian handles this, because you know, so far Belisarius has been loyal. Let's see how Justinian handles this, because it's understandable him being suspicious and worried. I get that, you know. And you guys, they seem like friends. Their wives are friends. Let's see how this goes, man. I'm worried for Belisarius, because that's usually like, you go out and you achieve all these things in battle, conquest, blah blah blah. It's usually the people back home scheming on you that bring you down, man. Happened with Caesar. That's probably what undermined Hannibal the most. It's just the fucking conspiracies back home. Same thing is developing against Belisarius here. I hate that shit so much. You know, I really hate that, man. Like, I love my favorite, one of my favorite dynamics or types of relationship, even in movies. I love a big dog or a kingpin with a super loyal and effective henchman. You look at The Wire, Marlowe, he had Chris and Snoop. Look at Avon, he had Weebay and these other guys. I love that shit, man. Like, these are people who could very easily turn. They're strong enough, they're lethal enough. You look at them and you wonder, dude, just take over yourself. But they're like, nah, man, I'm loyal to my guy. I love that shit so much. I love that shit so much, man. It's that is my favorite type of relationship of all time. You know? It's the most admirable relationship of all time. I love loyalty. We all do. I love Antonina's relationship with Belisarius. She's out here with him on campaign, dude. You get the feeling that if something happened to Antonina, that would just fucking destroy Belisarius, boy. I feel like that, you know? Like, if something were to happen to Antonina here, man, that would absolutely destroy him. But I don't know why she's... Maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll get into why she's accompanying him on campaign and stuff. Maybe she has a good military mind. Maybe she, you know, how she confronted the Pope. That's not a military mind. Maybe she's a good... she's good at reading people and reading situations and stuff, you know. Maybe she has the brain for that kind of stuff, you know, and sussing people out. Maybe she's a good negotiator, you know. Maybe she's just really, really good emotional support for him, you know. You need that, man. You need that. The stuff with Naples, I mentioned it even before he got into it. Like, when the leadership of Naples refused to open the gates, the civilians got slaughtered. That always happens, as if it was like, as if the civilians can do anything. Like, they are fucked regardless of what they do. They're screwed regardless of what they do, man. They turn on the gods, they get killed by the gods. They refuse to open the gates, they get slaughtered by the Romans. But the siege of Rome, bro, him sending the hands out to pepper these guys with arrows and stuff, those hit and run campaigns against them. Just ride out, pepper them with shots, arrows and stuff, you know, keep them off balance as we buy time for the supplies to get here, for reinforcements to get here. And taking Rome is a big deal, bro. Like, the stuff he's achieving out here, it reminds me of Hannibal. It really reminds me of Hannibal. It's almost, it's like he's like a king. He's like an emperor, but playing the role of a general. You get the sense that if this guy were to become emperor himself, it'd be amazing. But he's, you have a general here doing great things and making the emperor look minor. That's a problem. That's a problem. And people will be whispering into Justinian's ear like, yo, bro, they already did it after Carthage, saying that he wants to set up his own kingdom over there. Fuck, man, I hate that shit so much, bro. That kind of scheming brings down great men. That snakery, that scheming. I love how he handled, is it Vitiges? How he handled that siege, man. And the way he responded to the Romans, urging him to stake everything on one decisive battle, knowing he's outnumbered. And it's like, dude, do you think we're playing dice? Like, dude, he got advised by his subordinates to go after the Persians in Damascus, and they ended up losing badly. And those were his subordinates, bro. Probably other generals. You think he's going to listen to civilians? Nah. He bought himself time, sent Antonina and, is it his secretary, Procopius, supply, and what he, that diversion tactic, not a diversion tactic, but John, the guy he sent to go raid the homes and the farms of these warriors who are fighting, who are sieging Rome. Genius. Because now they have to go address that, whether they like it or not. They have to go and address that, whether they like it or not, man. To the point where this guy wants a truce now. Like, you're a serious guy if the guy besieging you wants a truce. Oh, that's crazy, man. The guy besieging you wants a truce. That's serious. I'm in love with this guy, Belisarius, man. I'm worried for him, though. I can sense the scheming happening in Constantinople. I'll see you guys in the next episode. This I've been recording for Jesus one. This is like a whole movie, an hour 45. Yeah, we'll continue the rest later. So far, so fucking good, man. Belisarius. Justinian needs to stay strong, bro. But I feel like Justinian will start listening to these guys whispering in his ear, turning him against Belisarius. His own wife might start doing it. I'm very wary of Theodora, man. And you understand Justinian's perspective on all this. You get that, Bro, being emperor, you can't relax. You can't just chill, man. That revolt alone, that Nika rebellion or revolt or whatever, that alone will make him super paranoid, man. Even make his wife super paranoid because they won't risk losing, They won't even let anything build to where it's like, I have to kill 30,000 people to quell a revolt, Fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, all that. They won't allow anything even remotely close to that to happen. So they'll be super wary of him. This is like, the senators in Rome getting nervous about Caesar on his conquests. It's that dynamic all over again. I'll see you guys in the next episodes, man. Peace. That was episode 1 to 3.